Hello, everybody. Welcome to our final Lunch and Learn of the year. We're really excited to have you all here today. My name is Tracy Philippi. I'm the Outreach Librarian here in Cottage Grove. I'd like to thank our in-kind sponsor, Friends of the Cottage Grove Library, for supporting all of our virtual programs this year. Those of you on the call probably noticed that I did hit record. This recording will be available on the Village of Cottage Grove Library Board's YouTube channel within the next couple days. So you're welcome to share this video, go back and rewatch it to gather more information that you may have missed. Oh, one person, I'm just going to let them in. Since this is our last virtual program of the year, our library board is working very diligently to figure out what next year's schedule will look like. So the best way to stay on top of that is to subscribe to our newsletter. I will put that in the chat as well in case you don't receive it already. So with that, I'm going to introduce our moderator today and also friend of the Village of Cottage Grove Library Board, Laura Bird. A Milwaukee native, Laura Ann Bird graduated from the University of Notre Dame with a degree in English. She lives in Madison, Wisconsin with her husband, 3 big kids, and a dog. When she's not reading, writing, or reviewing books, she loves to exercise and explore the outdoors. Marvelous Jackson is a follow-up to her middle grade debut, Crossing the Pressure Line, which garnered awards from the Independent Book Publishers Association, the Midwest Independent Publishers Association, and the Arts and Literature Laboratory's Wisconsin Writer Awards program. Join Laura on Instagram at Laura at the Library, where she celebrates all things literacy. So I'm going to pass the baton over to Laura.
Thanks, Tracy. It is such an honor to be here. I'm thrilled because not only is Michael, our featured guest, a friend of mine, but he's also my publisher. I should say, actually, he was my publisher first, and then, I feel like we've become friends in this process because he's so wonderful to work with. So just an introduction about Michael. Michael T. Braun is owner and editor-in-chief of Orange Hat Publishing. Michael has degrees, including a PhD in English and Communication Science, both from UW-Madison. Prior to purchasing Orange Hat Publishing this past summer, Michael worked for several universities in academic research, evaluation, and publishing. He's a voracious reader of all genres with a particular fondness for history, mystery, and middle grade. Michael lives in Wauwatosa with his wife and 2 little children, whom he's raising to be very good bookworms. In addition to reading, he loves to run, wrangle children, and write. Poetry, songs, you name it. So it's been such a pleasure for me to get to know Michael professionally and personally, and I'm thrilled to introduce him today. Michael?
Well, thank you so much for that lovely introduction, Laura, and welcome everyone. It is a pleasure to be here to get to talk a little bit about the publishing business. Now, if you are saying to yourself, well, I'm kind of unfamiliar with the publishing business and how it works, join the club. All my experience prior to coming and buying Orange Hat was in academic publishing, where things are done much differently, sometimes better, sometimes worse. But I kind of bring that ethos of academic publishing and this openness and this sense that we're all in this together to my work here at Orange Hat. So I've prepped a short presentation, which has some information about how we work and other things that kind of take you inside a publishing house and what we're looking for. I have some time for Laura to talk about her experience as one of our authors, a 2-time author with us. And then I want to have plenty of time at the end for questions and discussion, because that's kind of what I'm most interested in, is hearing about your experiences and your questions and other things you want to know. As Laura just mentioned in the chat, she'll be watching it. That's a great place to put questions in. If you have them as we go along, the chat's good. We can perhaps stop and answer them at the time. If it seems good, Laura will interrupt me with any pressing questions. And otherwise, it's just a good repository for questions to ask at the end. Of course, no need to put them in the chat, especially with a group. We've got a really nice size group here, so we can have plenty of time for actual discussion and don't need to restrict ourselves to speaking only when called upon or only based on what's in the chat. So feel free to share all your thoughts as we go along. I'm going to go ahead and share my presentation. And then I'm also going to see if I can put myself down in the lower left corner there. All right, can you see my slide and see me in the corner? It looks weird. My eyes look weird if I look down at the corner. Look, yep, but there I am. So here we are. I always like to do music themes with my presentation, so you'll see a lot of different music connected with what we're doing here. So Laura gave me such a lovely introduction. I hardly feel anything else is necessary, but hello, my name's Michael Braun. In March, I was looking for a new job, and I emailed Orange Hat's founder, Shannon Ishizaki, because I knew Shannon was someone who knows a lot of people. And I thought, well, maybe Shannon will know a new opportunity for me. I'm ready for a change, ready to do something different. Maybe staying in academic research is not the answer for me. Maybe I want to try something different. And Shannon, to my complete surprise and frankly astonishment at the time, said, seriously, how about taking over my company? Little did I know, Shannon had been asking herself some of the same questions that I'd been asking me. Is this my future? Is this what my work is going to be for the rest of my working life? Shannon founded Orange Hat when she was 30 years old. She had a baby daughter at home. She was looking for opportunities for creative fulfillment and had a friend who was looking to publish a book. Shannon said, well, great, I can help you with that. We can figure it out together. And from there, a very modest goal of publishing 6 books a year to cover the cost of her software licenses that she needed turned into Wisconsin's largest indie publishing house. Of course, you can't walk away from a business like that. You can't walk away from all those authors, all the responsibility you have, all those incredibly close connections that really come to feel like family. But how do you pitch someone else on taking over the business? It has to be the right person. They have to have the right skill set. They have to have, even most importantly, the actual interest to take on someone else's job. So it felt like the universe was speaking as we were brought together. It felt like an opportunity I couldn't pass up. And I was so excited to say yes and be able to purchase Orange Hat and become our editor-in-chief. So I wanted to keep the presentation simple today. I've just got 4 orange things to know, just 4 things to know about indie publishing. And so here we go, 4 things, that's all. Number 1, authors are the extraordinary people when it comes to publishing. Publishers are the ordinary people. And I don't mean that as some kind of, false self-deprecation or something. I really mean that what authors do in getting a manuscript ready, that's the extraordinary piece of this. And for us, we get to live in that world where authors are sending us extraordinary things that they'd like to get published. I emphasize our ordinariness as a way to take any fear out of this idea of submitting your work. I'm just a regular guy. I just love to read and write and edit. Right now, I know it looks like I'm on, some kind of tropical place. Well, you all know that's just a fake background I have. I'm literally sitting in my basement in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. I have a space heater going behind me because it's about 55 degrees down here. It's an unfinished basement. That's the space in our house where we have to work. And that's the kind of ordinariness, the kind of everydayness that I hope all of our authors, whether they've published with us or are thinking of publishing with us, understand. We are just ordinary people. We don't have high and mighty power. We're just here to work with you and to make great books happen. One of the things mentioned in the description of this session that I wanted to emphasize was the kinds of submissions that stand out to us. Now, I have a whole presentation on this. It's a topic I love to think about. I gave the presentation in October or early November at the Brookfield Public Library, talking about submissions that stand out. That was such a fun presentation to give. The things that I want to emphasize here also tie in with this idea of being ordinary. First and foremost, books that are readable stand out. When the prose is written so that the pages feel like they're turning themselves, word by word, sentence by sentence, paragraph by paragraph, chapter by chapter, things just flow together. That's something that stands out. It sounds so ordinary. It sounds almost like faint praise, but it's really one of the highest compliments I can give because it's so difficult to do. And authors who can do that, put that together, really stand out. And then there are some other elements of the story where I can see as I'm reading it that this was a story that was thought through, that there aren't sudden jumps of logic or big shifts in the middle of the book that don't serve the story, but instead it's something that is well captured. And then characters that feel real, that have motivations that I understand, or to take it back to an even more basic level, characters that have motivations, period, um, because I read a lot of submissions. And if I'm scratching my head at the end, like, yeah, I get the villain was like evil. Okay, I don't want to be the guy who's like evil doesn't exist. Like, I understand. But at the same time, I didn't really understand why they wanted to steal that money or why they wanted to hurt that person or why they were doing what they were doing. That kind of thing just takes me out of the book. All of a sudden, I'm no longer living in the land of the book. And now I'm living in the land of my own head. And I'm asking myself, what? But why did that happen? I don't understand. Those are the kind of things that authors can do so well when they can craft those stories that allow us to live in that world. Um, and it's such an honor to be able to be there with them. So the big takeaway here, don't be scared of your publisher. We're just ordinary people. We love to read and we'll be excited to read your work if you have something to submit. So that's orange number one. Orange number two, hybrid contracts. So this is using some industry terms here. A hybrid contract is a contract that a lot of small publishers like Orange Hat use. The author helps pay the cost of getting the book out there. So the author will pay, for us, I think, a small to modest amount of money to cover things like having an editor go through the book, doing the cover design and the interior design, getting the book established for sale. And then in exchange, since the author is making an investment in their work, the author receives most of the money from the sales of the book. So I publish the book. That means when the book sells, I get paid. The amount that the author receives is called royalties. For hybrid contracts, royalties are much higher for authors than they would be under what's called a traditional contract, in which the publisher takes on all the expense and all the risk, but in exchange keeps almost all the money. And I say here, hybrid contracts, the future of the industry. Publishing historically is an industry with very, very slim margins. And a lot of publishers struggle to make money, a lot of big publishers. One of the reasons that happens is because they are taking a gamble on every single book they produce. So every single book that they put out, they have a number that they need to hit. If we sell this many based on our investment in this book, then we'll make back our money. If we fall short on that, we're going to lose money. Just like any other creative industry, sometimes those losses are built into their, how they're thinking about things. I've read that publishers expect to lose money on every debut novel that they publish. The hope then would be the second novel, the third novel, maybe one of those takes off and builds from that first novel, and now the publisher is able to make money. For small publishers, the options of hybrid publishing mean we get to be a lot more flexible in what we do. We get to take different types of risks because we're not taking a risk on a book-by-book basis. We also get to work with a much wider variety of authors. One of our favorite authors whose book came out this summer, her name is Lorna Beale. She's 83 years old. It's her first book. It's touches back on some of her summers growing up. The book's called My Sisu Summer, Sisu being a Finnish word for guts and strength and grit. Lorna was not going to get interest, most likely, from a traditional publisher. She wasn't interested in going on some kind of big book tour and, being active on social media and doing whatever else. This was a fulfillment of a lifelong dream for her. So any success of her book, any sales, are success for her because it means more people are reading her book. Lorna is exactly the kind of author who I'm excited to work with and who hybrid contracts make possible. I don't have to worry about hitting a certain sales target and saying no to people who've written great books just because my projections say, I don't know if we're getting to 4,000 copies within 18 months. So this is one of our key ways that we make money and kind of how we operate is through hybrid contracts. Next up, orange number 3, money, more about money for us and money for authors. One of the key pieces that we do in our budgeting, I never use sales and the projected revenue from sales as part of our budget for our business.
Is that the best
So,
one?
sorry, someone's not muted. Let me see. There we go. So when I think about our business and the kind of money that comes in that keeps our company going, I think about those contracts and making sure we're continuing to get great submissions, that we're reviewing them, and that we're able to keep publishing those books, and that as the core of our business is what is covering our expenses. If something were to happen where that doesn't cover our expenses, then I want to make an adjustment on that end. All the money that we get from selling books, from the sales of books, most of that goes back to authors. And the money that's left over is what we use for our marketing budget. So the idea is the more books we sell, the more money we have to market books, which means hopefully the more books we sell. And you can see how it all adds together to success for authors and success for us as a publisher. Ultimately, when I think about this venture and I think about how I approach it and kind of factor it into my own family budgeting and make sure that this is a business that's viable for us, and I also think about what our authors are putting in, my starting point is always that a life among books is a life worth living, that there is inherent value in writing and in publishing. And I love being a part of that for people and getting to share this process with them and finding ways that it can work for us, keep our business operating, and also provide that return for authors so that they can start to see their dreams come true. And if part of that dream is a financial return, that they're in the best possible position to start realizing that.
Michael,
Yeah, sorry, Laura,
can I
please.
we just had a chat come up in the chat about something that you just said. So I don't want to get you off topic,
No,
but you mentioned something about 4,000 books being sold in 18 months. Is that just a benchmark that you pulled out of the air, or is that something that you personally would consider being a successful book?
so yes, exactly. When I think about these kind of projections and I think about what our return is for books, the money coming in if we were publishing someone on a traditional contract, that's the general benchmark I look for. The chances that this book will sell about 4,000 copies within 18 months. So that number comes from kind of looking at other sales factors and other things. It also comes from what I know we make per book sold. And if we're selling that many copies, the likely return per book for us, minus out what I would be paying the author for those sales. And it's all about recouping those costs for us. Now, the reality is when it comes to doing these projections, I don't have very good data. And I'm a quantitative researcher by training. So I'm all about building models and trying to understand sales projections and other things. And I know the factors that I have to predict sales are very limited. It's a lot of guesswork, and it's a lot of looking at the author, trying to figure it out. The easiest folks to work with if they are interested only in a traditional contract would be if they've published before and have their sales numbers for those books. And then I can start to take a look and kind of understand, what did their previous publisher do? How were they able to hit these numbers? And then base that into my calculations. So it's a pretty rough number, or it's not part of exact modeling, but that is in general what I'm looking for and thinking about as I'm trying to understand and determine contract types. All right, moving on. Number 4, indie strengths and weaknesses. There are some things that we're really good at, and we like to sing our praises and make sure people know it. And then there are other things where we're just not good at them. We're trying to get better. We're always willing to try things. So I wanted to highlight those. For strengths, I think our ability to produce a well-edited book that tells a great story and gets to the heart of what the author is trying to say is something we're really good at. And then making beautiful books. If you have a chance to go on our website, take a look at our store and see some of our titles, I think our covers stand up as some of the best in the business. And I mean that against the biggest publishers in the world. I think our covers stand out as fantastic. And that's because we invest in really talented people and taking our time with covers to make sure we get something that the author loves and something that when it's up on a bookshelf, in a bookstore, in a library, when people see it, they don't think, that doesn't look quite as good as these other books. But instead, that cover catches their eye and they want to pay attention to it. So those are some of the things we're really good at. Some of the things we're less good at, marketing is number 1 on the list. When I talk about marketing and strategize with our authors, I emphasize that our biggest strength in marketing is being a partner to the author. So being able to listen to what the author needs and help to provide that. Supporting the author's voice and helping to amplify it, which we can do through social media or making connections, drawing on our author network and our other resources. Those are the kinds of things we can do for marketing. When it comes to things like, will my book be available in bookstores coast to coast on the day of its release? I can promise your book will be available for bookstores to order on day one, so they can stock it. But our ability to commandeer that shelf space and guarantee that kind of release, that kind of big pattern, we can't guarantee it. We have a few bookstores that we're really close to that we'd love to connect authors with for doing book events and other things like that. But largely that marketing piece falls on the author. I hope in 2025, let's say I'm giving this presentation again a year from now, I hope to be able to highlight more of the things we're doing from marketing. But I think like a lot of indie publishers, marketing will always be something that we struggle with, always something where our own investment in marketing resources in terms of hiring people to do things will always be something that we're behind on. So that kind of marketing and that kind of reach into stores and having that big experience, even things like, being able to schedule book tours for authors or things like that. I think that's always going to be something that we know we don't do as well as a big publisher. And those are always opportunities for growth and getting better. It's one of the reasons I like talking about our weaknesses and the things that we don't do that well. It always leads to good ideas and other suggestions for that partnership with authors. So it's something I like considering and talking about. So those are my 4 orange things. I like to think about publishing as a journey. And there's a couple questions I like to ask authors. I like authors to ask themselves. I like authors to ask me, where do I want to go? What are my dreams for this book? What are my expectations for what I'm doing? And then who do I want along as a partner on that ride? There's a lot of choices that authors have to make, both aspirational choices like getting an agent, getting a contract with a big publisher, things like that. And also very basic choices like, is this person that I might work with to publish a good partner for me? Are they going to do what I want? Do they care about my work and want to see it succeed? So I encourage all of you aspiring authors out there thinking about this to be asking these same questions. I like to ask them of myself as well. And when I ask, who do I want along for the ride? Laura Bird is absolutely one of those people. Laura is such a dedicated author, dedicated to her craft as a writer and telling fantastic stories, dedicated to working with editors, listening to suggestions, and using that to make her books the absolute best that they can be. And then as a partner for her publisher, for us here at Orange Hat, and working together to try to make awesome things happen for Laura's books. One of the most awesome things that happened this fall, Crossing the Pressure Line was selected as the City of Wauwatosa's All-City Read book. Now, they picked 2 books. Laura's book is for children, but as far as I'm concerned, the other book is really not that important. There's really only one All-City Read book, and it's Crossing the Pressure Line. I hope everyone reads it. And we're very excited for 2025 to be a really big year for this book and a big year for Marvelous Jackson, too. So thinking about that ride, what does it mean? How does this all work? How do things come together? I'd love to hand things over now to Laura. Laura, I'd love to hear just a little bit more about your experience in publishing, and anything else you want to share to us to give us that author perspective, that insider author perspective on publishing and writing. So I'm going to take down my slides and kick things over to you.
Well, thanks. I wasn't really expecting that. Really nice introduction from you. Thank you. I can just give my own little experience. When my manuscript was complete for Crossing the Pressure Line, it was during the pandemic. I should mention that I had worked extensively with a freelance middle grade editor who lives in the Minneapolis area. I had found her on Google. She's written a wonderful book for anyone on this call who wants to write middle grade fiction like I do. Her name is Mary Cole, and her book is Writing Irresistible Kidlit. That's how I found her, was through her book, and I've worked with her extensively. So I don't know, Michael, what percentage of manuscripts landing on your desk have already gone through that rigorous editing process, but mine certainly had. To make a very long story short, it was during the pandemic. I very much wanted to find an agent. I thought that that was the route I wanted to go. I did that whole process of trying to find an agent. It did not go anywhere. It was through one of my Instagram friends, actually, Maggie Smith, another author who's published by 1016 Orange Hat. She opened my eyes to this whole classification of publishers known as independent presses. I did not even know something like that existed. And when I heard about Orange Hat, it was sort of like the hair on the back of my neck went up, because I thought, my goodness, here's a small independent publisher in the state of Wisconsin. My book is very much a Wisconsin book. Like, if Orange Hat doesn't want to publish my book, I'm out of options. I didn't know what to expect. So when I submitted my materials to Orange Hat, that was when Shannon still owned the company. That was before you came along, Michael. But it was a very rigorous process. I want to make that clear, that Orange Hat is not a vanity press. I mean, I had to go through all of the steps. It was excruciating. It took many months, but when I got the email from Shannon saying, congratulations, we'd like to publish your manuscript, it was really one of the best days of my life, aside, of course, from getting married and having children. So it's been a wonderful experience. I will say that when it was time to find a publisher for my second manuscript, Marvelous Jackson, I opted to go right to Orange Hat. I did not look for an agent. I did not submit to larger publishers. I've had such a positive experience working with Orange Hat. It's been such a partnership that I went directly to Shannon again, and I had to go through all the steps. And when she came back and said, we'd like to publish Marvelous Jackson, that for me was really an incredible experience. I think with every experience in life, what you put into it is what you get back. And I'm all in 100%. Whatever Orange Hat needs me to do, I will do. It is my professional priority. And I think that comes back to me then. I think that's a really good working relationship. I certainly don't expect Michael or Orange Hat to do the heavy lifting for me. But I will say it's been wonderful to have you as, my support system, Michael. And when I email you with questions, you're so good about getting responses to me. And I think we have a really great professional relationship. So I think that's my advice to anybody is, you get what you put in. Is that kind of what you were looking for? I don't know if I...
That's wonderful, Laura. It's just great to hear your perspective and to get a chance to hear, from an author about what it's like to work together.
Can I add one more thing really quick?
Please.
Because this is, I think, an important point. I have a number of friends, in the literary community who are published by big publishers. And I would say, you alluded to this slightly, I think with the exception of people on those publishing staffs who coordinate book tours, I think that's where you see it play out the most, those like big book tours. I think that I've had friends say to me, published by the big companies, that they still have to do all of the legwork. They still have to give their all to marketing and promoting. It is still like a daily task for them. They are not getting that, from the big publishers. So I feel like in that sense, we're all having to do the work. So I just want to make that clear.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that comes down to the ways in which books are marketed. I was reading an article about book distribution and other options that are available and things to explore, things for publishers to explore. And one of the points that the author made was that like organic discovery of work is largely a myth. And what he meant was books don't take off because it's sitting on a shelf somewhere and people just organically walk through and happen to be drawn. Hundreds of customers are just drawn that day to the book that's sitting there. Instead, it comes from the the conversations that people have. Oh, you have to read this book, from write-ups in magazines or other places, trade journals, from trusted recommendations from librarians, from your local bookstore, where the person there you always talk to and they always know a next great book to read. It's things like that that really lead to these things. Big publishers can't do that any better than we can. And it means that a lot of what authors do is talking about their work. When I talk with authors to kind of make a plan for marketing, or sometimes have conversations with authors where they say, I'm disappointed with where my sales are at, one of the first questions I ask is, how many copies of your book do you have in your car? Now, why ask that? Well, if you have copies of your book in the trunk of your car, it means the moment that you tell someone about your book and they say, oh, I'd love to read that, you can say, well, great. Here, I have a copy for you. And maybe it's just a copy you give for free, but even better, hopefully that's your opportunity to sell them a copy. And usually those authors who are kind of not where they want to be with sales, they say, well, not only do I not have any in my car, I don't actually have any of my own book at all. And I say, well, let's change that. I can order you any amount of your books that you want and sell them to you at a cost based on the print cost so that you can have them. Because this should be, maybe it's not the first thing you say to a person when meeting someone new, but it should be in the top 3 when you're getting to know someone. Publishing a book is a really extraordinary thing, and letting people know that that book exists is your first chance to getting a sale. Your easiest book you sell is to your mom or to a kid or to, a partner or whatever. That's your easiest sale. Every sale after that is harder. And being willing to talk to folks about it, to always think of yourself as that author with something to sell, is really a key component of trying to find that success, no matter who your publisher is.
I think it's not always easy to put yourself out there and to talk about your book. And I think for some new authors, that can be kind of an uncomfortable moment. I got some very good advice before my first launch from a staff person at Mystery to Me bookshop here in Madison. If anyone remembers Charlotte Martin, she was wonderful. She was in charge of my first launch party. And I was sort of, whining to her like, I feel weird talking about this with people. And she said, stop. This isn't about you. This isn't about Laura. This is about the kids out there who need your story, who need it to grow and develop and feel less alone in the world. And she gave me a nice, firm talking to. And I really have taken her advice to heart. And I think authors need to do that. Like, this isn't about me. I'm just trying to get this story out in the world for the people who need it.
I once had a conversation with Dennis Lloyd, who is the director of the University of Wisconsin Press. And we were talking about academic publishing, which of course is a different conversation than commercial publishing. But I asked him, like, what are your metrics for success? Like, when is a book successful? And he said, there's a certain number of people in the world who want a copy of a book. And a book's been successful if every one of those people has a copy of the book. Mm. If there's 100 people in the world who would be interested in this very esoteric academic text, and we sell 100 copies, then that book was successful. And I think that piggybacks really well with that advice you got, Laura. There's all those kids out there who would love to have a copy of this book. And we want to celebrate every single time one of those kids gets a copy. That's what success is.
Right. I have a couple questions here in the chat, Michael. Can I ask you a couple of them? So, okay, many large publishers have a line in their contracts stating that the publisher has first right of refusal for future books. Is that the case with indie publishers?
I don't know about every indie publisher. It's not the case for us. And in fact, I usually say to authors who are coming back to us with another book, which that's wonderful to see. But I also like to ask, have you looked for any other publishers? Have you explored other options? I think folks should make an informed choice about every single book they publish. I also love to say, have you looked into self-publishing? Because for some folks, it might be a thing that they want to do. It's good to know your options. So we do not have that piece in a contract, but please know that doesn't mean we're not interested in your future work. We want to consider future work from all our authors. Nothing makes me happier than when I see a second book come through. Like Lorna Beale, who yesterday submitted the manuscript for her second novel. Haven't read it yet, But I'm super excited too.
That's great. Couple more questions. Is there a marketer on staff at Orange Hat?
Nope. There could be in the future. I could see doing it. I could also see going with someone on like a limited basis, like 5 to 10 hours a week or something. One of my biggest hesitations with hiring someone to do marketing is that in my mind, it's sort of us making promises we can't keep. I would rather invest our marketing resources in things that are directly related to what authors are doing, than to try to employ someone who's going to work some kind of wizardry over social media marketing, or something like that. I just don't think that there are answers that make it worth our while to do that type of investment at this time.
Mhm. I know that some of my fellows, authors printed by small presses, hire publicists to do some of their, marketing and publicity outreach. When I get asked about that, I actually don't hire anyone, but my background up until this point was in nonprofit fundraising and communications. So I feel like I have the skill set, but that's another option too for people who don't necessarily feel comfortable taking the reins with that.
What I would recommend for folks interested in that, identify key products that you're hoping to have delivered by someone else. If we're your publisher and you have set things that you're looking for, so for example, Laura has a press kit that we worked with her to put together, some other things like that. A lot of those things we can put together for the author. And we want to do it in partnership, so if we want to do an FAQ, well, that's something we want to write with the author, other things like that. If hiring someone else to do it, which is a perfectly good and valid thing to do, think about those specific products as opposed to I will charge you this much per week, and these are the things I'm going to be doing, trying to get you on TV and trying to do this and trying to do that. It's nice to have someone trying for you, but paying someone $1,000 a week or whatever they charge, I mean, some really high amounts for someone to be trying for you, for me, it just doesn't cut it. Like, we need something specific that they're going to deliver. That's what you should be paying for.
That's a great clarification. Brad asks a totally different question. I'm kind of skipping around here. With a hybrid contract, how much investment from the author is typical? And maybe I'm not understanding this correctly. If you decide not to publish, does the author get any of their economic investment back?
Great. So let me clarify first, Brad, just to make sure I'm understanding your question, and then feel free to unmute if I'm not. Us reviewing submissions is totally free. There's no fee to submit work, and we take an academic approach to how we review manuscripts. We review every single manuscript we receive. Ideally, your manuscript to us will be read by 2 to 3 people, all of whom are instructed to provide constructive feedback. If the manuscript is in really rough shape, the feedback is probably going to be less helpful. It's probably going to be something like, this is a first draft and keep writing, something like that. So there's no economic investment for an author to submit something to us and have it consider. If we accept it, and our acceptance rate, like, we ultimately publish about 15% of the submissions we receive. That's kind of where we're at right now. If working with an author, then for a hybrid contract, there is investment from the author. It's based on factors related to the work, the length of the work, the kind of complexity of the layout of the work, and other things like that. Somewhere between, I'd say it's reasonable to expect somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 is the cost to the author, with 50% due to get us started, 50% due, the remaining 50% due once the author has said, yes, we're ready to go. I've held a copy of the book in my hand and it is ready. And that's the only cost to the author. There's no ongoing costs or anything else. It is just to produce that book. And that's the start of what I consider a lifelong relationship with the author.
Brad, does that help? I think you're muted. Oh, no,
Sounded
you're
like an
muted.
affirmative. 2
Okay,
thumbs up.
thumbs up.
Thanks, Brad.
Samantha asks, Michael, is there a minimum print run number that Orange Hat does? And do discounted author copies count toward royalties? Great question.
Great question. So print run, we use for 99% of our printing, print on demand. So meaning the digital files exist that allow a super duper fancy printer from Ingram, that's the company we use for our distribution, the world's largest book distributor. They take those digital files and they can churn out a beautiful looking book, one copy at a time. We can literally place an order for a single copy and they will print it and send it to us and charge us the same amount as they would if we ordered 1,000 copies. So we do not have any minimum print runs. We don't have any expectations that anyone is going to be warehousing books. We don't have space to warehouse books. We do not expect or want our authors warehousing books. It is only a way for something to go wrong. A flood, a fire, a rodent infestation, a very curious dog or cat or other family pet or children or whatever. We don't want people having 1,200 copies of the book sitting in their basement or their garage or their attic or wherever, or their living room because they ran out of room in the other places. We want authors placing exactly the right size order that they need for them. And same when stores order through us, when anyone orders through us, we want to print those books because they are needed. That is kind of the most important thing. So do discounted author copies count toward royalties? No. Instead, for our hybrid contract authors, we sell author copies based on print cost plus $2 a copy. Over time, because of discounts that Ingram offers, the print cost goes down, meaning an author's first order of their books is their most expensive, and every order after that is less. And then authors are free to do whatever they want with their books. Our hope is that authors are selling those books. Authors are doing events, talking to people, whatever it might be, and have a chance to sell that book at the retail price. That tends to be an author's biggest return on their book. They make the most money when they sell their books themselves. So it doesn't count for royalties, but that is also where authors are making the most amount of money with their books.
That's a great point, Michael. I get asked a lot, like, well, where should I buy a copy of Marvelous Jackson from, Laura? And I always say, well, I mean, I've got that box in my trunk. How many do you want? Because that's more money coming to me directly versus, if they buy it, well, Amazon, that's, I believe, the smallest royalty that I get, right?
Yes, that's right. And it's the smallest for us too. So we take whatever we receive from a sale through Amazon, which is kind of fulfilled through Ingram. Orange Hat's cut for each of those books sold is 50 cents, and the rest goes to the author. Now, it still ends up being a higher than a traditional contract royalty percentage. Somewhere in the range of like 20% of retail ends up being the author's royalty for a book sold through Amazon. So it's still pretty good. But yeah, because of, the more people in the middle between that sale and then the size of the wholesale discount offered, all that adds up to lower return. Whereas if you're buying based on print cost and selling at retail cost, authors get the largest return that way.
Samantha and Phyllis have really good questions. I'll come back to those. I just want to quick jump to Greg's question. Hello, Greg, another writer friend, because this is kind of along the lines of what we're talking about. He asks, Michael, what is the wholesale discount for bookstores?
So good question. Bookstores are looking for a wholesale discount at about 40%. So they're going to buy the book for 60% of retail, sell it, and then they'll have 40% of that retail as their profit, their return. So that presents a challenge for us. If someone wants to order, a bookstore wants to order through us, fantastic. 40%, heck, 45%, we'll work with the author. Sometimes we have schools ordering and the author says, I don't care, I don't want to make anything from this. I just want the school to have copies. And in that case, the school buys it for a super huge discount. And that's a great way to do it. The challenge is that through Ingram, for a bookstore ordering through Ingram's system, which is a wonderful system and makes things very convenient for bookstores, for them to see that 40% discount, we have to put in a 55% wholesale discount. So Ingram gets their cut and the bookstore gets their 40% discount and everybody's happy. Everybody except me, the publisher, and the author, because 55% also applies to Amazon and Barnes & Noble online and bookshop.org and any other site, Target, Walmart, we have our books listed there too. Anyone can list books that are on Ingram for sale because Ingram makes the data available. So all of them are now paying 45% of the retail cost and making much higher profit. I don't know about any of you, but helping Amazon make more money is not one of my priorities for 2025. So we're stuck in this position where it's like, okay, if we put in 40%, like the standard discount, bookstores don't see 40%, they see less. So they're like, oh, what is this? I don't understand. So do we put in 50%, 55% so that bookstores see it? That just doesn't sound good. We can put in a wholesale discount as low as 30%, and Amazon and Barnes & Noble will still list it. So I have this question in my mind, and I need to talk to some more folks to figure it out. Should we actually put in 30% and emphasize to bookstores that they should order directly for us for that 40% discount? It would mean that we make more money, authors make more money. Is it better for everyone? I don't know. These are some of the businessy questions that kind of, I mean, maybe they don't keep me up at night. They're not quite that stressful or worrisome, but I just keep thinking, like, how do we help indie bookstores sell books by indie authors so that, oh, here I'm getting a thumbs up because of my accounting. Indie authors, indie bookstores, and indie publishers, we all want to work together to make money. And figuring out the best way to do that is something I'm always noodling over.
Samantha has a great question, changing direction just a little bit. Do you submit books for local, regional, and other awards on the author's behalf?
We work with authors to do that. Sometimes there's costs associated, and in some cases we cover those costs. In other cases, that's something where we try to factor in how much time is involved, what are the copies we're sending off, and try to share that cost with the author. So for example, if there's no fee for submitting for an award, but we have to send 4 copies, I usually do it. Our senior editor, Lauren Blue, is usually the person who does this. It takes her about 45 minutes to put that all together, and there's the print cost of the books and the shipping. And we usually work it out with the author in advance. What do you want to apply for? How much is it going to cost? And then the author covers that cost, and we do the work to get things submitted.
Yep. Do you have any interest in publishing poetry?
Interest, yes, as long as the author says they're not planning to get rich from the poetry. Poetry is a really tough area to make money. And I think we have published 1 poetry collection on a traditional contract because of the author's fame. Every other poetry collection we've published has been on a hybrid contract. Poetry is a perfect example of where the hybrid contract is fantastic, because we can get a beautiful book of poems out into the world. We can help the author realize that ambition. And then, hey, I love trying new and novel ways to market things that maybe people aren't racing to their local bookstore to pick up, like the newest thriller by whatever author. Poetry fits in that category. Poetry is one of those beautiful things where connections with schools and libraries and other things like that can really have legs, because what a beautiful thing to share in those kind of environments. I was just talking with one of our authors who's a professor up at UW-Oshkosh. His name is Bill Gillard. We're working on a couple of books together right now. And he's also a poet and was asking me about this. And he said, well, Michael, what about an imprint that's specifically focused on poetry? He said, there's a lot of folks who want to get poetry out there. They kind of understand what it takes on an economic level. What if you had a way to market directly to those authors? And I'm like, that's a great question, Bill. I'm going to add it to my ever-growing list for 2025. Orange Hat Odes, or whatever we would call, I don't know, a good poetry imprint. Because it's an area I love, and I like seeing us do more in it. I would say we receive about 3 to 6 poetry submissions every quarter.
Wow, I wasn't expecting you to say that. That's a lot more than I would have guessed, actually. Samantha has a great question, which actually I get asked a lot. So how long does it typically take, upon a manuscript being accepted, to actually seeing it available on a shelf somewhere?
We like to estimate 9 to 12 months as the time that it takes. It doesn't mean we can't move faster. Sometimes there are factors that make us say, okay, we want to move faster. And it doesn't mean we can't move slower. There are other times in which having that extra time can be really valuable. for marketing or other things. And sometimes we delay because of where the author's attentions are at any given time. The author needs to be ready for that book to come out. So we want it to come out at the right time. But counting on 9 to 12 months, kind of factoring that in, that's about the standard time. So we're about to do our next submission review period in January. We'll be reviewing all of the submissions that we've received from late September through to kind of right now. And I'm imagining I'm going to start putting those books on the calendar for fall releases at the latest. And we're probably now talking early spring releases as kind of the far end for those books, which would be a little over 12 months.
That's what both of mine were, I believe. Both of my books, it was pretty much from start to finish about 12 months. That is all the questions that we have right now in the little chat room. So if anyone has any more, pop them in, or you could unmute yourself and ask. Tracy, I hope we've addressed everything that you wanted us to talk about. And Michael, I hope we've addressed everything you wanted to talk about.
Other than hearing from folks and their dreams and things, I'd love to hear.
Do you
more
ever take
folks.
a trilogy at one time?
Oh, good question. There's certainly a lot of folks who submit kind of the first work and say this is either part of a planned, trilogy or series, or even that they have substantial project on other things. I think we can do cool things if someone had a trilogy that was ready to go. The cool thing we could do is we take those 9 to 12 months to prep everything or to prep a lot of stuff, and then we schedule the releases, one book every 6 months or something like that as a way to keep that momentum going, especially when it's planned out as a trilogy in advance, meaning there's a reason why book 1 is book 1 and book 2 is book 2 and book 3 is book 3, so that book 1 is ending where we're like, I need the next book. I'm certainly open to that. I see no reason to say no.
I have a question. Do you publish children's picture books? And if so, can you talk a little bit about how you find and retain illustrators for those projects?
Sure, we do. That's how we started. The company started as a children's book publisher, and we still publish a fair number of them and get a lot of submissions as well. A lot of those books come in needing illustrations. And in fact, some of the books that have illustrations that come in, it's one of the factors we have to assess. And if the text is wonderful, but the illustrations are not at that level that they need to be, it would be a case where we'd say, are you open, to having this book re-illustrated? So how does it work when a book needs illustrations? First off, I'll just note, we've been talking about money and giving this inside look. Children's books that need illustrations are really expensive for folks. It's a significantly higher investment because of the need to pay the illustrator. Illustrations, I think, they're not astronomically expensive. They are something that's affordable and within reach for folks. But at the same time, most illustrators are charging somewhere between $100 and $200 a page. So if you're needing 24, 26, 28, 30 illustrations, you see how that kind of cost adds up. The way we handle illustrations, step 1, the author reviews our list of illustrators, kind of a network that we have of illustrators we've worked with in the past or who have reached out to us expressing an interest in having a chance to illustrate a book for Orange Hat. The author will pick 3 to 5 illustrators from that list whose work they like, and I reach out to those illustrators, share the text with them, and ask for a couple of basic sketches, rough sketches, that I hope they're spending an hour, 2 hours tops producing. That allows the author to get a sense of how the illustrator is seeing their book and their style and other things, and then to select someone. From there, we select that illustrator, we sign an illustration agreement that specifies costs, and then we have an initial meeting where we're talking about what illustrations do we imagine for each page. Then the illustrator takes those notes. They might do, they'll do whatever we agree on. Sometimes it's starting with the main character and seeing exactly how they look and getting that right. Sometimes it's illustrating maybe the first couple pages and having a chance to share notes. And then the illustrator will move forward with illustrating the whole book, keeping the author and the publisher, updated along the way until we end up with some illustrations that really make that child's book sing.
That was the first time I'd ever heard a publisher say that you accept already illustrated books
Hmm,
as for
interesting.
review. So I'm putting
Well,
that one in my
I mean,
back pocket
my
for some.
dream, and I'll give you an example. We have an author out in Oregon who's working on his first book with us. His name is Jeffrey Smalley. He's a super talented illustrator. And so, what I got from him was the dream, the author illustrator book. And I said he was looking for a traditional contract, which usually is just unaffordable for children's books. But I said, Jeffrey, can you also do the layout of this? Like, can you literally provide to me the PDF file that I need to take to Ingram? He's like, yeah, I can do all that. Like, I will, whatever contract you want, because my investment in this, aside from, working on marketing in him with and things like that, my investment in the book is, 4 to 6 hours of my time to get everything up and ready for sale. Like, cool. That sounds fantastic. So I love it. I would love to work with more author illustrators. And with the caveat being that it's good to know where you're at with your artistic skills and have, someone who is proud because they loved art in high school and haven't done much other than doodling since then, and now is trying to illustrate a children's book. It's a project on a different scale, and it requires talents far beyond my understanding. Seeing a children's book come together through illustrations is almost like watching magic happen to me, because illustrators have talents that are just so otherworldly, so different from my skill set. So when we have someone who does that and can write books, it's awesome. Love working with folks like that.
I'd also love to hear you share your thoughts about AI in the publishing, illustrating, and authoring industry.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the promise of large language models and automated text generation, I don't think that the actual result has lived up to the hype. I've been consistently disappointed by what it produces, including, I mean, I try out every tool that's available. I used ChatGPT today to calculate a math question, and I literally got a wrong answer. Like, this is not a joke. It produced a wrong answer to a basic math calculation. I think this is what we see. So in terms of AI, I don't know, it's just not doing anything for me. I think in terms of generating images, if an author is saying, I want some images like this for my cover, and they want to use AI image generation and say, here's some ideas, that seems like a cool thing to do, right? Gets some creative juices flowing, gives them some ideas to think about. Then the other AI piece that I've been exploring recently is AI, and please note every time I say AI with the word intelligence in it, I have giant scare quotes around it. I don't think there's anything intelligent about it. But AI proofreading, the ability to have an automated tool go through and catch those pesky little punctuation marks, like, oh, at the end of my quotation, I should have a comma, but instead I had a period. I would love it if we have a tool that reliably catches that and fixes it. So I've started to use the proofreading tools that Apple has built into their operating system on our manuscripts. And when I give something to an editor, I like to have done what I call a fast proofing already done on the manuscript, and to have every single change that it's made automatically listed through words track changes. In my mind, when it goes to an editor, then yes, they're going to review what's happened. And of course, they're going to keep their eyes out for things that were missed, but it also frees them up to think a little more deeply about the work and to offer that comment or that question as opposed to just correcting the language. A book that I recently edited for one of our authors, her name is Heather Frimmer. Her book coming out this fall, it's called Always Hope. Keep your eye out for it. It's a really special book. She has a big scene in which two characters are playing golf. Heather has never played golf before. My ability to read that through and say, wow, both players got par on this golf course. Like, they must be excellent golfers. To her, she's like, wait, why? What's so special about that? Like, well, golf is an extraordinarily hard sport. And so the chance to free up my mind from the proofreading work I was doing and think more deeply about that, if I can take things off my plate and have things automatically corrected so I can think more about those deeper questions, that seems like a win when it comes to publishing. So for tools like that, I'm all for it if it can do the job properly. For other stuff, maybe someday it'll be great, but in my experience right now, it is only disappointing.
Anyone else? Any other burning questions? Michael, I feel like you've given such great information. Oh, someone just posted something in the chat. Oh, Brad's just saying thank you for your time.
Thanks for coming, Brad. Great chatting
Yeah,
with you.
the questions have been great. This has been helpful for me too, kind of getting all this inside information.
Well, it's a pleasure speaking about this. You know, I'm new to this business too, and it's been interesting. There are times in which people say, well, usually publishers do things this way. And sometimes I'm like, oh, I had no idea. Like, that's good to know. I don't want to screw things up. And other times people say that, and my reaction is, well, that's not the right way to do it. So no, that's not how we're going to do it. And I think one of our biggest differences is the manuscript reviews, right? The idea of not getting back to people when they submit something. And if you're, not even taking the time to send a rejection email, like that just doesn't make any sense to me. We're all human beings. We're all trying to do our best in a really tough industry, and letting authors know that they're the extraordinary ones, not the publisher. I think that starts with acknowledging that we've received a submission and then giving timely feedback and saying, whether it's for us or not, giving that feedback and saying, thank you for everything you do. That's really important.
Well, that makes you a class act, because that certainly is not the case across the board. And on behalf of myself and authors everywhere, aspiring authors, that I can't thank you enough for that, because that's just kind. That's kindness. And that's good karma that you're putting out into the world. And I think that's a great way for you to run your business. So thank you, Michael.
Yes, and please know that decision is entirely business based. I hope that it leads to more awesome books and more awesome book contracts and better sales, because we're all in it to make money, whether it's a dream coming true or not. I hope we all get rich from books. That would be a true dream come true.
I think it's a great way to end things. Tracy, is there anything else that we need to address before we?
No, this is fantastic. I feel like we could ask you questions all afternoon, Michael, but we want to be conscious of your time. And both you and Laura, thank you so much for being here and sharing this information. I did receive a couple messages that Facebook was down, so there may have been people trying to access this link that couldn't get to it. Greg's nodding. So glad everybody here found that link. We, again, will make this available on the library board's YouTube page, so feel free to share that.
Can I
Will
ask
do.
one quick logistical thing? If people do, like, upon watching this video, this recording, if they do have questions for Michael or even myself, what's a good way to reach us? Michael, I don't know if you want to throw out a good
Yeah,
way
just
for
put my
people to reach
email
out to
my
you?
email in the chat.
Oh.
I did, you're reading my mind, because I did have a closing slide where I had contact information. I'm not going to bother putting that up, but feel free to share our contact information. You can always go to orangehatpublishing.com. In fact, keep going to it, because we're going to have a new website launching in early 2025, which I'm really excited about. But yeah, feel free to email. And we also have a phone number, which literally rings my phone and I answer it, because that's how businesses work. Well, I mean, I don't answer it every time, but it is there. So we try to do everything I can to be accessible to folks who have questions, whatever those questions are.
Yeah. And I echo that. Michael at orangehatpublishing.com. If you're not able to see the chat, that's Michael's email address. I'll give you my email address too. It's labird, LABIRD, @att.net. I'm also very active on Instagram, and my Instagram handle is actually what's on my screen here, Laura at the library, with underscores in between each word. You can reach out to me there. I'm also on Facebook. I welcome questions at all times.
Thank you both.
Thank
you,
you.
Tracy.
Wonderful. Everybody have a great day and a nice holiday season.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.